In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity. And welcome back to another week in the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here on 1701 AM, as we equip you with practical solutions to live your Catholic faith in our modern world of today. And it's a very important day today for the United States of America, and that's why we've brought in dynamic Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, who is not a stranger to the Catholic Toolbox. Welcome aboard, Deacon. Can we hear you there, Deacon?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
Yes, you can hear us. There he is in the house. Excellent. So, look, it's a very important day in the United States. I believe it's about 3 a.m. your time. You're down in...
it's 1 a.m.
Oh, it's 1 a.m. actually.
And on the West Coast.
That's
yes.
some real commitment.
I do it for you, George.
Oh, thank you so much, Deacon. It's an absolute pleasure. It's an honor to have you here on board on the Catholic Toolbox as someone we admire and respect, and a good friend of mine. Tonight and today is a day for the free world, a day where your country, your nation, under God, will determine the outcome for the next 4 years. And tonight, we're not here to point any direction, whichever side you're on politically. We're just simply here to speak about Catholic politics. Now, that's not politics within the church. That's politics in the real world, out there. What an ideal Catholic politician would look like. How a Catholic today can be a good politician. And also, we'll touch on the US election and how Catholics in good standing and in good conscience can actually vote correctly. This is a crucial election, and it's important that you vote with your conscience, because this will influence a serious outcome of moral issues to come for the next 4 years, and possibly the ramifications for the next decade or so. I mean, every election is crucial, and that's why here tonight, as an Australian, I am passionate about what's happening in the United States of America, and that's why we thought we'd cover this topic on such a relevant day. So, Deacon, start us off by, where should Catholics sit in terms of politics? Because most Catholics, a lot of Catholics I know, seem to not be interested in politics. They rock up on election day, grab a few pamphlets and vote as they're walking in, while they grab the sausage. We call them snags here in Australia. They grab the election day snag, the election day sausage, and they sort of read things and they take a bit of everything. And they decide as they walk in, without understanding the serious ramifications that it has morally and also socioeconomically. So, Deacon, what's your message to Catholics looking at politics and snubbing off politics simply?
Well, you bring up a number of good points, George. And, considering the fact, when you look at politics today, I mean, in good conscience and in the preservation of virtue, could a Catholic become a politician? Because all of us are called to a vocation. Every single person has a vocation in life. And some people are called to religious life and to priesthood. And most people are called to just sanctify the temporal order, right? Because we're called to make every aspect of our lives holy. To sanctify something means to make it holy. So that includes the temporal order. That means the earthly order, the order of the world, needs to be made holy. And one of the ways that someone can do that is by being a politician without compromising their beliefs. That's the key, because the temptation is, George, is when you get into politics, you begin to sacrifice your personal values and sacrifice your faith to worship the God of the culture. So, in other words, instead of you sanctifying the temporal order, you become a servant of the temporal order. We're servants of Jesus Christ that are
Exactly.
sanctifying the temporal order, but the tendency has been in for people of faith that are in politics to serve the temporal order instead of sanctifying the temporal order. And that's where we see so much problems, so much divisiveness within the political realm.
It's because essentially it goes back, the underlying problem seems to be that the people running for office are not sanctified. They're not living a life of holiness. They're not allowing the Holy Spirit to work through them. And them using and taking up that office in order to affect the good in society and to bring God closer to the people through whatever temporal actions that or temporal decisions they make. And most Catholics, a lot of Catholics, we can almost say most, because most Catholics don't practice the faith, but a large number of even practicing Catholics have lost interest in politics. Why do you think, Deacon, people have become so fed up? They don't, that you listen to politicians today, you listen to all the technical jargon that they throw around, and most people don't seem to be interested. But we Catholics have a serious role to play. Why do you think people have become disenchanted from politics, especially the faithful?
That's a great question, and I probably consider myself one of those too. As far as because I get sick of all the rhetoric and all the lies and the falsehoods and everything else being thrown around, that they don't actually focus on the issues themselves. It becomes about this person's personality. It becomes about media spin. It becomes about virtue signaling. It becomes about everything else except the issues itself. Because at the heart of it, we're supposed to be trying to get to the truth. What is the truth here? How are we helping the common good? It's not about making sure that individuals are happy. Politicians are there to make sure that they're serving the common good. What decisions are they making that are for the good of everybody? The problem is this: many politicians, including politicians who claim to be people of faith, will say whatever they want you to hear so that you can vote for them, and when they get into office, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, regardless of what promises that they made. And
It
that's the
becomes sort of like they
frustrating
become
thing.
career politicians in a sense where they're really just there to promote themselves. It's that self glory. I just want to get to the job. They use either left or right wing ideologies to sort of make their way up to the top. And the second they reach heights, they become manipulated not by good forces, but by political and personal motives, and they lose. They either become a different person, or they never were somebody that's concretely grounded in the goodness and in serving society to begin with.
Yeah,
Really,
exactly.
that's what's been happening for the past 50 to 70 years. I mean, you look at politicians, and let's say even sometimes maybe church leadership. You look at, let's say, society as a whole. You look at society and the way people were before, let's say the 40s, let's say the 40s, 30s, 20s. There seems to be a bit more solidarity in terms of leadership, don't you think, Deacon?
Yeah, I think so. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Um, we it's frustrating. I think a lot of people now, especially in our country here, um, uh, don't feel united. I give an example, George. When it comes to certain important issues and non-negotiable issues that are there again for the good of everyone, there's very few people that fit all of the criteria that we look for as Catholics, right? We're
Yeah.
not saying that the person has to be Catholic. We're not saying that they're supposed to espouse specifically Catholic values. But again, we're looking for someone that's going to, who's the best person that's going to be able to carry forward the message of the truth and beauty of who we are as human persons into the temporal sphere, and that's going to that's going to benefit the good of all. Catechism talks about this. It says human society can neither be well ordered nor prosperous unless it has some people invested with legitimate authority to preserve its institutions and to devote themselves as far as necessary to work and care for the good of all. That means all people, George, including people that are there from the moment of conception until natural death,
Exactly. To
because
uphold the natural law.
God's in charge of life,
Yep. So
not politicians.
to uphold the natural law. I mean, it's not their job to sit down and evangelize the faithful and to bring people to the Catholic faith and to discuss theological issues. That's the church's scope. However, in an ideal Catholic world, as Quas Primas by Pope Pius XII, or was it, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Pope, you've read Quas Primas, Deacon. It was issued by one of the popes, at least. It will come back to me. He spoke about, a Catholic state, should promote, Catholic politicians, or a good Catholic state should even promote and allow the church, the Catholic Church, the true religion of God, to flourish additionally. It's interesting how far, when a society is a bit more moralized, a bit more faithful, and even a bit more Catholic, that sometimes we can even promote and propagate the faith through the state even more, which is a good thing. But we're not in that era of society anymore. We've moved on. Now we just simply want to uphold the moral law, the 5 non-negotiable. What are the 5 non-negotiables, Deacon, for those listening, especially in the United States of America, who are about to vote and need to know where both sides of politics, Biden and Trump, where do they sit? But let's talk about the 5 negotiables, non-negotiables. What are they that Catholics
Okay.
need to be looking out for?
So these are 5 issues that concern actions, George, that are intrinsically evil. That means by the very nature of the act itself, it is an evil act, and therefore we cannot participate in these acts as human beings made in the image and likeness of God. It is a serious sin to deliberately endorse or promote any of these 5 things. And no candidate in good conscience can support these because there are grave offense against the dignity of the human person. And those 5 things are, first of all, abortion.
Abortion.
Right? I mean, come on. The direct
Killing
and
of an innocent
intentional
human being.
taking of an innocent human
Yep.
life. It's a form of homicide. Therefore, we cannot promote that or endorse that
So
whatsoever.
any
The second,
candidate who promotes or supports, that's a strike against a vote for them, obviously.
oh, absolutely,
Absolutely.
without
Let's now
question
go
or
into the
without doubt.
second non-negotiable.
Yeah, the second one is euthanasia. Off the, and they disguise the language here, George, to say mercy killing, death with dignity. Those are just slogans and pejorative rhetoric for basically, again, taking the life of an innocent person, this time at the end of their life. Because here's the thinking of the culture that politicians have to fight against. We live in a culture that says that you are useful as long as you're productive. And when you're no longer productive, when you're old, you're a burden on society, you're a burden on the healthcare system, you're a burden on your family. And so, we'll kill you. That's the state now, saying that we're going to take your life because you're no longer productive. You're a burden to society. And it's just good for everybody if you weren't here anymore. That's what euthanasia is. And therefore, we absolutely cannot support that as
Absolutely.
well.
So no candidate who supports that, that's another strike against their name.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Let's now go
Absolutely.
into number 3, Deacon.
The third non negotiable, George, is embryonic stem cell research. Okay,
Yep.
why? Because human embryos are human beings. Look, you can call them whatever you want, embryos, zygotes, blastocysts. It's just the name of a human being at an earlier stage of development. We have names for human beings at all stages of development, right? We have infants, toddlers, tweens, teens, young adults, middle age, old, right, elderly, and we even have names before you're born as well. Zygote, blastocyst, embryo. So those are human beings, and therefore we must respect the dignity of all human beings. We cannot take an innocent human person and experiment on that person in order to develop some kind of cure for us. Or, look, that's what Hitler did in Nazi Germany when he experimented on Jewish prisoners in concentration camps, which is very similar to what embryonic stem cell research is.
Absolutely. So no politician, sorry, who supports this kind of moral evil that's can be elected. So that's another strike against their name. Let's go into the number 4, Deacon.
Yeah, number 4 is human cloning. So attempts
Wow,
to
cloning.
yeah, human cloning. And so that's when you take genetic material from a fertilized embryo and you take material from that in order to create another person. Human cloning involves abortion because the rejected or unsuccessful embryonic clones are destroyed. Yet each of the clones are a human being.
Exactly.
so so again, we cannot, absolutely cannot
And
support it.
just
Now
as
we like with the previous one, embryonic stem cell research, we can use human stem cells, from bone marrow,
exactly,
from
which doesn't
fetal
affect the
cord
human
blood and things
being.
like that.
Yeah,
Right. Exactly.
exactly. So embryonic stem cell research also um, aborts the embryo, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So they both simultaneously. Yeah, so essentially, embryonic stem cell research is wrong in essence because it commits abortion, right?
Yeah, it's taking the life
Yeah,
of an
because the
innocent
the
human being.
embryo is so
Absolutely.
small that you can't do your research. You can't carry out research unless, I mean, eventually the embryo dies. It eventually gets killed. I mean, with
Yes,
humans, obviously you can obtain from bone marrow because we're fully developed. So any
exactly.
politician who supports that, there's another strike to their name. Let's move to number 5, Deacon,
Well, number 5
the
is
lucky last one.
marriage.
What is it,
Yeah,
sorry?
it's marriage. Yeah, marriage is a
Homosexual
union. Yes, the marriage
union,
is a
civil
union of one.
unions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, marriage is one man and one woman, and any children they have together, which serves as the heart, the core, the center, the foundation, the nucleus of civilization, culture, and society. So, legal recognition of any union as marriage undermines true marriage, and legal recognitions of, say, for example, homosexual unions um, does not does homosexual persons disfavor by encourage them to persist in what is an objectively immoral arrangement. So no Catholic can support a politician that supports the so-called redefinition of marriage. Because remember,
Listen.
marriage exists before the state did.
Exactly. And the only reason why the state even gets involved at all in marriage goes back to the post Middle Ages and during the Renaissance, especially, and moving into, after the Enlightenment era and now into the modern, postmodern era, is simply because, why doesn't the state get involved in your friendships? Why doesn't the state get involved in your business relationships? It has no business, right? But the state has an interest to support and foster marriages because that is where future citizens are forged. In
Yeah, yeah,
good future citizens for our nation are forged in the home between a male and a female through the bond of marriage, through the commitment of marriage, loving each other and bringing life into the world and forging our citizens from a civic standpoint. The state saw the need to support those marriages which bring our future citizens, good future citizens, into the world to serve society and be a part of society. So these 5 non-negotiables, I mean, the fifth one obviously is very important, very serious, and they're all serious. So Deacon, that really needs to be the criteria for those in the United States at the moment, looking at the policies of Donald J. Trump and where he stands, and Joe Biden. Really, I mean, and we're not here to push in any direction. I think it's very clear which way things are leaning, and we won't say it here on air, but those voting in good conscience in the United States and in any other election throughout the world need to look at the policies on those 5 non-negotiables. If you miss them, you need to replay them, and you need to look at it very seriously. And look, how do we determine, Deacon, on these levels? Is it sort of like a process of elimination where those 5 non-negotiables, and also are there other factors also as well that we
Well,
need to
look,
consider?
when you think of other things like because when you think of candidates, what else are you thinking of? You're thinking of foreign policy. You're thinking
Yeah,
of immigration. You're thinking of a number of other policies and other issues, economic development and things like that. How you deal with crime. So these are things that we're concerned about. But look, without these 5 non-negotiables, none of the other ones matter. Because see, what
exactly.
some Catholics want to do is they want to put those other issues on the same level as the non-negotiables. Death penalty and just war and immigration and
And even
foreign policy
socialism
and
as
all that.
well.
But without these 5, the other ones don't really matter because if think about it, if we're not treating the a human being with dignity and self-respect, then
Everything
how
else goes out the window.
yeah, because you're going to be influencing how you deal with other the other citizenry and people outside of our country. So it colors how we look at how we approach the world and how we govern as well.
Exactly. I think people really need to sink into that because, sure, the things that appear to be important are foreign policy, even let's say socialism creeping back into governments. I mean, it's very serious. I mean, it disguises itself as freedom, liberation, but they're going to take your liberties away. All the other things that are on the board, but really, the underlying problem, if you dig deeper, is because they don't value life. They don't value the moral law. Now, if you valued life, and therefore resulted in being against abortion, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, how life is formed, we go through to marriage. I mean, against homosexual marriage, or doesn't really exist. It's called a union, which they label as a marriage. If you go against, if you don't value life as the underlying issue, therefore the cause, the natural resultant cause, is that you would not value life, and therefore it goes into your foreign policy. It creeps into every other aspect of civic life. So those are the underlying issues, and that's why they take precedence. So, Deacon, let me go back to my original question. Should a Catholic weigh up, look at the 5, okay, look at President Donald Trump and where he stands with the 5 non-negotiables, and where Joe Biden stands with those 5, and count how many the majority wins, or with a process of elimination? How should it be done? How should they discern?
Well, first of all, you shouldn't take a person's personality into your decision making. It's not about the person or that person's personality. We're not voting for someone because of their personality. We're voting, can they get the job done and
Exactly. Get the
and
job done.
upholding.
It's not about, what they might say on Twitter. It's not about, what he seems sleepy, or, it's not about, the way he speaks, or, how loud he screams, or, the hairstyle. It's not about those things. It's simply, can they get the job done? How they speak and how they close their button shirt and they appear on the cameras is not going to put money in your pocket. It's not going to put fuel in your tank. It's not going to feed you and your families. And let's go into more important details. It's not going to value human life and promote the moral law. We need to look who's going to get the job done, no matter what they say and how they do it. This is politics. We are here to get a job done. That's how we need to see it. I think people are waking back up and seeing the superficiality of people in politics, and how they get there, God knows. But people are starting to wake up, and there's a big revolution everywhere in the world. Where we want to see results. When you make promises before election, we want to see it done after the election. You're here to get a job done, and Deacon, it's very important that we don't judge people by what they or how they look or their personality or what they say, but to say, let's say, the majority of the non-negotiable, because sometimes there may be one where they support, and you're stuck with two options. You really have to pick between one or the other, and then one may not support four, and then they support one, and then the other one supports three to maybe three non-negotiables, and there's two left. Do we look at the majority?
Well, yeah, what we have to do, and what a lot of the bishops have been saying, because they've been trying to provide, well, not all of them, but a number of
Yeah,
bishops
not all of
here in
them.
the
Yep.
United States have tried to help their faithful form their consciences in deciding who to vote for. Again, a lot of the bishops not saying who to vote for, they're in looking at the principles. And so when we talk about forming our conscience, it's not about being programmed by the Catholic Church to think a certain way. Conscience, remember, is a judgment of reason, whereby we as human beings recognize the moral quality of particular acts that we're going to perform or a candidate's going to perform, and we have to evaluate the way they act in two different areas. One, are they following the natural moral law? And if do we have to look as Christians, who's the best one that's going to follow the divine law, right? The way God has revealed himself in scripture, sacred tradition, and the teachings of the church. Now, we're not saying the person has to be Catholic, but which one is going to best uphold the natural moral law and the divine revelation as revealed to us by Jesus Christ. And so we have to form our consciences and make decisions based on what's best for everyone, based on how are they conforming their political ideology to the natural moral law. Again, the natural moral law is that part of God's law that's in every single person, where we can come to know who God is by reason alone. St. Paul talks
Yep.
about this in Romans chapter 1 and Romans chapter 2. Um, and again, who is going to best uphold the teachings of Jesus Christ and the church? Again, they don't have to teach Catholic theology in order to be elected, okay? But which ones are going to hold the basic principles again? Because these are principles that are part of the good for every single person in society, and not just for myself. Because we should live in a society that worships the Trinity of me, myself, and I. It's all about me. But what we want to focus on, which candidate is best going to allow everyone in society to flourish, and to be able to assist people, yeah, that need help, of course, but which one's going to be the best one in order to really bring dignity to the human person and to every member of our society.
It seems a lot of the Catholic faithful on social media seem to be swinging in one direction, but we're not here to swing in any direction. But really, we reassert form your conscience. This is the five part criteria that needs to determine the outcome. And where have the Catholic bishops in the United States issued some kind of a guide, or somewhere where those in the United States, our American brothers and sisters, especially everybody listening here tonight, is able to access and get a copy of it very quickly? I mean, your election
Yeah, there's
fairly
bishops that
soon,
have
yeah.
put out all kinds of statements to the faithful. So to try and list all the bishops would be difficult to do in this format. But there are two places where you can go that I think give out the best guides to the Catholic faithful, which anybody, no matter whether the United States or not, would highly benefit from. One of them is EWTN. EWTN has actually two pretty phenomenal resources. One is a Catholic Voters Guide
Yep.
that talks about the general moral principles. Again, it's available at EWTN. and the other one is a guide for moral decision making. All right, so those would be two, and then the other one is from Catholic Answers in San Diego.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Voter's Guide for Serious Catholics is that one. So those would be the resources that I would refer people to, and they can Google those and be able to download those documents.
And excellent. We'll talk a little bit more about that after the break. So now take our break before we open the line to call in here with your questions or comments. The number is 96256111. That is 96256111, or simply email us at thecatholictoolbox@gmail.com, or in the comments section on any Facebook Live platform. We're live on EWTN Asia Pacific, the Catholic Toolbox page, Voice of Charity, and several other pages, and YouTube Live. But before we go on our break, if you're considering hiring a photographer or videographer for your wedding function or occasion, I highly recommend, and I highly recommend especially, that you go and check out, and without a shadow of a doubt, engage Captured Frames. That is www.capturedframes.com. They do tremendous work, and especially during these times of COVID-19, where there's been a lot of loss of business, it's important, it's imperative to try and support as much Catholic businesses as possible. And that's why I highly recommend you go to their website, check out Captured Frames. There is a reason leading up to my wedding next year, they have been the choice, undoubtedly, that we have gone to for our wedding. I highly recommend you check out and get in contact with them. Got in contact with Siren on CYRON at capturedframes.com.au. Get in contact with Siren. What are you waiting for? They do tremendous work. So, stay tuned here on 1701 AM. We'll be back shortly. fan, and welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here on 17:01 a.m. as we equip you with practical solutions to live your Catholic faith in our modern world of today. And this week, Dynamic Deacon and I are tackling the serious issue of Catholic politics and how we, as Catholics, as faithful, through any election, and especially today for the United States of America, it's extremely important that Catholics in the US wake up and look at the 5 non-negotiables that you need to assess when you make your decision. This is not just a 4-year vote. This is not just another election that's going to go by. These 4 years will determine the outcome of our society. Our society is heading towards a cliff of moral destruction. And if we do not vote correctly, this can result in serious ramifications for the next 10 to 20 years, and only God's mercy will pick us back up. If there is patience left for God, for how much humanity has sinned, especially on a societal level, on a moral level, we pray that He doesn't find us like a thief in the night and doesn't come and delays His coming as a sign of His mercy. So, Dynamic Deacon Harold and I have spoken about the 5 non-negotiables. Deacon, you're back with us here live.
Yes.
It's a big day for you in the United States. So what's going to be happening? Give us a rundown of the election process in the United States and what's going to be happening today and through
Well,
it could be the next 2 days or so.
well, it's interesting, George. Most people have already voted. In most of the states right now, voting is done by mail-in voting. And so it's been true in my state, in the state of Oregon, in the United States for a long time. But almost every state right now, you vote by mail. So you can vote early and then send in your ballot, or on the day of election, you can drop off your ballot at any post office or any voting center. You can just drop it off there, or there's some place you can still vote in person as well. But we have to, as Catholics, we have to be careful here because sometimes people receive multiple ballots. For
Exactly.
example, George, if you move, sometimes you receive ballots at both addresses because the system is a little slow to catch up on the change, or someone may have died and then they receive a ballot because again the system is slow to catch up with the fact
Exactly.
that the person is deceased, and now you have somebody filling out their ballot and the other person's ballot as well, and then mailing them in. So there could be some cheating going on here. So we have to be very careful of that as people of faith to follow the guidelines and the directives. And so what happens is they count the votes, and then we have something here in the United States called the Electoral College.
Yep.
And basically what that is, it prevents states with massive populations from deciding the votes at every single election. So for example, you have massive states like California with great populations, or the state of our state of New York, or our state of Texas, or Illinois, and states like that. So if you just did by popular vote and just say, well, okay, whoever gets the most amount of votes wins, those places have such huge population centers that they will be determining. So if you live in,
Yep.
for example, Mississippi or Vermont, or a much smaller state, you will never have an actual say in the vote. Your vote won't matter
Yep.
because there's always those big, massive population centers that are determining the outcomes of elections. And so they have something called Electoral College, in which if looking at the voting regionally in the state, if a person receives enough what they call electoral college votes, then they win that particular state. That system again allows for every person, no matter how big or how small their state is or what city they live in, to be able to have a vote and help to determine the outcome of elections. And some states, counting the votes may take a couple of days. And that's why you hear, I mean, you'll find on election night, or even the day after, because all of those votes have to be counted.
So it
Sometimes that
could go
takes a
up to
while.
2 days after the actual election today. It's a big day, and it would be especially praying for President Donald Trump. I know it's very stressful as President of the United States. It's a very stressful job. We'll be praying for him, that he'll be coping, with the stress, and for the other candidate, Joe Biden as well. We pray for him.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the scripture says, pray for your enemies, right? So no matter what side you're on, we should be praying for the person. And and the bottom line is, George, no matter what happens, God's will be done. Jesus Christ is still going to be Lord. He's still going to get up tomorrow and breathe and do all the things that we were doing before.
But it'll be
It
a
may be
different world.
harder.
We'll be
It may be more
heading.
difficult depending on who
Yeah,
wins, but Jesus Christ is still Lord.
exactly. Amen. There's no doubt about that. But this is before the election. We have a moral obligation to vote with our conscience. One of the parties will uphold more than the other, and it's your job as a US citizen in this context, especially to to judge with your conscience for the leader of not only the United States, of the free world. This will have ramifications internationally. We know, we've seen. It's time for you to go out there and make your vote count as a Catholic. And how can we encourage, Deacon, especially good Catholic politicians? Because it seems these days that we've gone from an era where kings in the Middle Ages have been canonized as saints. Can you imagine a local politician these days being canonized as a saint? The amount of politics that goes on and the manipulation that happens. How can we go back to have people who live their faith getting into parliament, staying strong, keeping the faith, and fighting for the moral law, and also, even in some cases, the propagation of the Catholic faith as well, after the moral law is obviously pushed and promoted as much as possible in their capacity? How can we go back to those days where we had good, better Catholic politicians? We'll deal with it in the scope of the Catholic sphere, because we can only do what we can only speak about what's in our scope as Catholics here. How can we, Deacon? I mean, it seems so far-fetched.
Well, I'll give you a good example. King Louis the Ninth of
Yes,
France. Here's a king. Now, remember, he was the king, and he realized that his job as the king is to serve his people, to rule his people under the principles of the moral law. So what he did, he fed people literally from his table. He would invite hundreds of poor people into his castle every day to eat from the king's table. He would serve them as king, and then his dinner would be to eat their leftovers. That was, I mean, imagine a
wow.
politician that served their people with that kind of heart and that kind of compassion, where they really, truly, and honestly cared about the well-being of individuals, and not for what's going to benefit them politically. So we have to vote for people and help to form and shape it. And it starts at the home. I mean, where do these politicians come from, George? They come from families.
Exactly.
So if we have good values instilled in our children, if we are good witnesses and models to them, of they can see us how we vote, make decisions with a Catholic conscience, that's going to be passed down for generations to come. Remember, even in First Kings chapter 2, when King David was dying, and his son Solomon was standing before him, he told him his dying words to his son was to be strong and show yourself a man. But he didn't tell him to be a man. He told him, how are you to be a man? Follow God's ways, God's ordinances, God's statutes, God's commandments. It goes, if you do that, you will not fail as king. Huh? So if we
So it's possible to
um
be a good Catholic politician using those examples.
yes, yes, exactly. It's possible. Difficult,
Is it
of
more
course you
difficult
want
today? Because it
to.
seemed like Christendom during the time, I mean, the faith was lived and breathed. Today, it is a different situation. You have lobbyists, you have special interests, you have people, and there's a lot of politics. I'm involved politically in my political party, trying to advocate for the moral law, pushing for what's good and conservative values. It's harder today. And definitely requires more prayer, and it requires us to be strategic about how we can actually get into politics if that's what God may be calling you to do. And again, to see it as possibly a vocation. Can we see politics, Deacon, as a vocation, as a calling?
Oh, absolutely. And what again, that calling's to help in to sanctify the temporal order. So we need good Catholics and good people of faith in politics,
Not to
in
stay out of
in
it.
order to sanctify that too. Because if not, it would just be totally morally corrupt. Because people are sadly willing to sacrifice their values in order to win. So sometimes in order to win, because that's the whole goal. Why even uh, uh, be a candidate if you don't think that you can win. But what a lot of candidates are willing to do, even candidates of faith, are to sacrifice and compromise their values of faith in order to win. It's like selling your soul to the devil. Jesus warns about this. In fact, you in Matthew chapter 6. Remember, do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where the moth consumes and rust comes in, because if you think that, well, you've already received your reward. you know so remember, we're looking and pointing toward heaven, toward realities that are not part of this earth. And so I definitely think it's a vocation that you could be a Catholic politician, but you have to have your conscience formed in a way, again, that's always pointing and directing people toward the common good. And the other thing is, Georgia, stop watching this stupid political stuff on television. Obviously, the media is very, very biased. And
We
so
know
people,
that, yeah.
again, they're willing to form their conscience by watching hours and hours of political television or listen to political talk radio, but they're not willing to form their consciences in accord with their faith.
Exactly. I mean, it really is pushing an agenda. We see that the media out there in the United States is really pushing. I mean, whoever it is, really pushing agendas, and whoever it is, we need to inform ourselves. We need to think for ourselves. Again, we need to stop. I don't even watch TV anymore because I know it's all
Yeah.
propaganda. Basically, it's all propaganda, and and it's designed not to allow you to detect that it's propaganda. Because if it did, you would turn it off immediately. It's supposed to slowly mold you over time, and that's why I really, apart from looking at the weather here and there and seeing what just happened, I'm not going to make up my views based on the television. I'm going to go do my own research, look at concrete facts, and then make an informed decision. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you a quick example,
yep,
George. President Trump was accused of separating family members, right? Children
yes,
from their
at the
parents
border.
that try to come across the border. But remember, George, before I was a Catholic speaker, full an author full time, I was in law enforcement for 23 years,
Yep,
including working in anti-terrorism. And I can assure you that people that are trying to kill us are trying to cross through the border. They're coming into Central America, working their way up to Mexico, and trying to cross into the United States. That's how terrorists are entering into the country. And as a little side note, that's why, for example, those cages were built. They were built by the Obama administration
exactly.
to house potential terrorists who are crossing into the United States.
An
That's
absolute failure.
that's what, yeah. And so when they separate families, what happens is the border patrol officer uh, are taught to look for signs of human trafficking. And so if they see if a child is not really comfortable with the people that he's with, they suspect, wait a minute, maybe this child might be a victim of human trafficking. And so they separate the child from the parents to determine, is
Exactly.
this child really the child of these two people, or is this child being trafficked? That's why they separate the families, for that reason. But that's not what the media says. Again, as you correctly so pointed out, George, the media these days they're supposed to be objective
Yeah.
and help people, to help them to form their consciousness, to think clearly. But they're teaching people not how to think now, George, but what to think.
There you go. We've done
Again,
the
they
thinking
become
for you. You don't need to do
yes, they
anything.
become
It's all done
indoctrination
easily.
centers now.
If you can hijack, if you can really get the information source and people trust you, if you can really manipulate the information source that people trust, you can influence people. I mean, really, if you actually break it down. And that's a classic example of the amount of falsehood that's out there, of how much fakeness is there. I'm not going to say the word, how much
Yeah, yeah.
fakeness is out there. And really, this election will determine which direction we head in, because there is two directions, and we all know them. We don't need to speak about it here live on air, but it's very clear. The five, and you'll see it very clearly when you cross-check both candidates, or maybe if I'm wrong, you'll see it, and it will come to you very clearly when you have the criteria in your hand. Get the Catholic voting guide, compare the notes, and it will come to you who to vote for. And we're not here to advocate politics for the sake of politics. Politics has to have an output. It has to deliver results for the people. If it's not about serving the people, it's a complete disaster. It's a total failure. Politics needs to return to being about serving the people. There's no point having, a nice figurehead in office that's delivering no results for the people, and the day-to-day people are suffering. And let alone, more importantly, what we spoke about, human dignity is not being respected. Then, as a result, people are suffering, economic issues, everything that flows from the respect for human dignity. You're there to serve people as a result of their human dignity, right? Therefore, if we don't support life in all those 5 non-negotiables, that really tells the tale about what's to come on economic issues, on infrastructure, on every other thing. So, Deacon, what can you leave us with as really the United States of America and the free world watches as you approach today? What can you leave us with?
Yeah, the concrete thing to do, obviously, is to pray and to fast. Bishops have been calling for months now for people to pray and fast for this election. Prayer is always good, of course. But remember, Jesus tells us that when he sent the 72 out, there's some that came back that they said, we could do all kinds of great things, but there were some demons we couldn't cast out. And Jesus said, yes, those can only be cast out by prayer and fasting.
Exactly.
So don't forget, if you want to help out the United States election, try and fast a little bit today.
And we have one last question here. Deacon, through email, Mary emailed us from Sydney, and she asks, what happens if the candidate that seems inappropriate and supportive of the non-negotiables in the majority wins the election? What should the Catholic voters do in that case?
Well, we can't just acquiesce and say, oh, well, that's it. No, our voices still need to be heard, because what's going to happen is that candidate is going to start to implement laws and policies that are antithetical to a culture of life. And so we have to stand up and let our voices be heard. The presidential election, we may have lost that, but we still have Congress. We still have the Senate and the House of Representatives. We still, because the president can't make decisions without laws without those two other bodies approving. So and all three have to agree, at least the majority. So we can also influence the votes in our Senate and in our House of Representatives. So that's something, again, following the same principles. And also encourage, if you have someone that's in a local office there, that's a good person who's doing the right thing, to encourage that person to maybe up their game and take it to the next level, and support again and encourage good candidates who are forming their consciences according to the natural moral law and divine revelation, so that we can have the best outcome for every single person in our country.
Exactly, Deacon. Look, and it's been absolutely phenomenal, and we're praying tonight that we wake up tomorrow with the best outcome. I mean, there's only 2 ways we're going to be heading, and we're going to be praying, we're going to be fasting, and we're with you, and we're with the United States of America, one nation, as President Donald Trump calls it, under God. And we'll be praying, we'll be fasting, we'll be with you every step of the way. So, Thank you very much, Deacon, for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, George. It's always a blessing to be with you and with all your listeners as well.
Thank you very
And
much, Deacon. God bless you and God bless the United States of America.
thank you, George. And thank you, Jesse.
Behind the scenes, Jesse, thank you for the hard work that you do. One of our audio engineers here. So, the Catholic Toolbox is also live for those tuning in with us through CRADIO, which is Parousia Media's online radio. Be sure to check that out through CRADIO. So, now let's really pray and fast that the election does turn to what God wills, but we pray that God's will is done, especially, and that we do have the outcome that will push the dignity of life and help society move forward the way that God envisioned it. So, thank you for equipping us with the tools, Deacon Harold. God bless you. If you enjoy listening to Catholic Toolbox, why not consider emailing us at thecatholictoolbox@gmail.com, or you can simply message us through Facebook or Instagram. We're live. If you haven't found our Instagram page, you can search us at The Catholic Toolbox Show, or on Facebook at The Catholic Toolbox Show. And don't forget to check out our website on www.thecatholictoolboxshow.com. Be sure to subscribe and download to the podcast. So if you want to re-access any episodes, you can download the podcast through any podcast platform. Simply type in The Catholic Toolbox. And again, right before we go off live on air, if you're considering hiring a photographer or videographer for your function or occasion, be sure to check out Captured Frames and get in contact with Cyron at CYRON at capturedframes.com.au. They do a tremendous job, and that's why leading up to my wedding next year, they are the choice that we have gone directly to. I highly recommend you check out and support good Catholic businesses like Captured Frames. So what are you waiting for? Check them out and give them a call. So, thank you for tuning in to the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa. God bless the United States of America. We pray for the election. And so, take care and take action. God bless. In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.
He's on.
Thanks, Deacon. Thank you very much.
Oh, where are you?
Yeah, thank you guys
Oh,
very
there you
much.
are.